Systems Engineering from the Gulu University and Agricultural Engineering majoring in Structures and Environment from Makerere University in Uganda. And this morning, Yvonne will present us their experiences on transfer stations in Kampala. Okay. Yvonne.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My colleague, Brian, has done part of my presentation. I work with him. I work in Uganda. He works in Malawi, but we all come from Water for People. So I hope you remember our vision and our mission and the countries that we're in. Yeah, so just to get straight into it. So Water for People partnered with GIZ in 2013, and the aim for that was to increase access to sanitation coverage through the promotion of sustainable sanitation technologies, but also scaling up pit latrine emptying businesses in the divisions in Kampala. The focus was on 3 parishes in Kampala, and what came out of this project was that we were able to have about 6 entrepreneurs, of which 5 are still very active up to date, development of business plans for the entrepreneurs, and at the end of that project, the entrepreneurs had been able to empty 400 pit latrines. Now, it is the findings and the challenges that came out of that project that then give us the background to this. So one of the main challenges that the gulpers at that time found was the high costs of gulping, particularly the transportation. So there's a bit of a distance from where the parishes are to where the treatment plants are. And so there were high transport costs, because if I have a small motorcycle and I'm carrying 4 barrels, and then I have to move these 4 barrels all across town and then come back, it becomes very expensive. And of course, the private sector never gets these costs. They'll always pass on to the clients. So what was happening is that gulping was actually becoming very expensive. So the first idea was to have a small fixed transfer tank system. Why that failed? Because of course land is a very big challenge in Kampala, and then no community wanted fecal sludge next to them. So that didn't work. So the second idea that we came up with was a mobile sludge transfer station. So you ideally have the capture, then it moves through this different small trucks, so the gulpers, and it can move to a large cesspool truck, and then it can be taken for treatment and reuse. So in between there is where we fix the mobile transfer tanks. And the idea was the gulpers with their drums can pour into the mobile transfer tanks, that these can then move to the emptying. So how did we approach this? A feasibility study was done, design process, fabrication process. The pilot was tested, and now we are continuing with continuous modifications from the results of the pilot. So an environmental and social impact assessment was carried out on the mobile transfer tank concept, and whatever impact came out was the remedies were incorporated into the design and the operation guidelines. But also a technical applicability framework was conducted by the Appropriate Technology Center. This is a research arm of the Ministry of Water and Environment in Uganda, and it was to ascertain the technical and economic viability of this concept in informal settlements, and they approved it, so we're able to actually get a go-ahead. So with our partners, Kampala Capital City Authority, they were able to donate 2 grounded cesspool emptier trucks. These were assessed for whether we could still be able to use them. And then these are actually what we used. So these were modified into what you're actually going to see as what is currently the transfer station. We designed using AutoCAD, and the design was, the first design was to accommodate the semi-mechanical gulper operators. So the loading and offloading systems for the first transfer station were all manual. So this is the fabrication process. So the first thing that was done was to fabricate the chassis with the Forza walking beam axle to which we attached the tires. We designed it to have a strength of 10 tons. And then the tanks were mounted and fixed. We also fixed the manual loading troughs. We added the hydraulic systems that would help to load and offload, and also with the tipping. And that is how the transfer station looks like. So, of course, it was painted, fixed, all the leakages were all fixed. We included a provision for a hose pipe when it's discharging at the treatment point. And then, of course, the transfer station is hauled around by a tractor. Yeah. So the idea is that the gulpers empty into the transfer tank, which is then hauled to the treatment plants. Prior sensitization is carried out in the communities so that the gulpers would be able to have sufficient material to be able to carry around. So before the transfer station gets to our community, the community is stalled, and those who need their pits emptied, they're prepared and they're ready, and of course the gulpers have done their different assessments of the pit latrines. We found that the operation costs reduced significantly per barrel from $7.5 to $5. And the transfer station is currently in operation, and the business model we're trying to build around it is so that it is managed by the Gulpers Association. Brian talked about the association that they have in Malawi, but in Uganda there's also a Gulpers Association. And the idea is that the transfer tank will be managed by them, and they can get a little bit of income from it, as well as it's accessible to most of the Gulpers. So of course, it was tested in the community. So that's what happens. It's brought to the community, packed somewhere, and then the barrels are emptied into the transfer station. Yes, and then once it's full, the tractor then comes and drives it away to the treatment plant. The current business model is that the gulp operator will source out the clients who need their pit latrines emptied. He will then request for the transfer tank. So currently the transfer tank is at Water for People Uganda offices. And the gulper covers all the operational costs attached to the transfer tank. That is, they'll cover the fuel, they'll cover the labor for the tractor driver, but they'll also cover dumping charges and any other fines in case they're found spilling. Although we have managed to ensure that the tank itself, we've done a bit of modifications. It has a water tank to be able to provide for and to avoid some of those spillages. Yeah. And then what are we currently doing? Of course, the operational challenges we found in the pilot phase was nobody wants to load manually. So we have converted the sludge loading system from a manual winch to an automatic 1-ton 24-volt DC-powered winch. This helps the process, the loading process, and it's much faster. We included a water storage tank, rubber stoppers, sludge guides were fixed so that we avoid spillage. Yeah. Challenges, even with the transfer station in place, there's still been unwillingness by the gulpers to lower the previous emptying costs, because nobody really wants to lose out in their business. And so that has been a challenge. Of course, there are only 2 tanks available, and this is not sufficient to cover all the informal settlements. And the high initial capital investment costs for the tractor, because that is still being covered by Water for People, and that cost hasn't really been recovered yet. So what's the way forward? We're going to definitely continue with our field tests. Every time it goes to the test, to the field, we take note of the feedback that we're given to make the adjustments. We want to increase the number of mobile sludge tanks, and at this point I invite partners to come and join us to be able to increase the number of mobile sludge tanks, because the concept is working, and it does work. And of course, have the new business model where the transfer tank is managed by the Galpa Association. Yep. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Yvonne. It's very interesting to see you keep on modifying your transfer stations.
Thank you.
2 questions?
Thank you very much. I would like to know if you are implementing some kind of block dislodging campaign in the block of the ward, and in terms of some awareness campaign or some kind of incentives to the household in terms of reducing the price of the service when that kind of campaigns is in place.
Okay, thank you very much. So currently what we're doing is we're working with the local leadership. As opposed to pit emptying by demand, we're encouraging the communities to do scheduled pit emptying, and this we work in relation with the local leadership. So we say the transfer station will be in this area at this time. These will be the Galpas who will be available, and we do this, of course, in collaboration with Kampala Capital City Authority. And then you have, so if the Galpa knows that he has very many people who are emptying, it helps to definitely reduce the cost. So we're encouraging the communities to sort of get into a system whereby they plan when they will empty so that they can benefit from the economies of scale. Yes, and also, of course, the transfer station doesn't make very much sense if you're just carrying 4 barrels. It makes sense if you're actually holding it when it's actually full. Yes, thank you.
In fact, I think you've partly answered my question, which is how you resolve the conflict between all the different emptiers. Even if you had, 20 transfer stations, you'd still have that issue. Which emptier does it come to assist?
So we did have that issue at the start, but one of the reasons why we actually then want to pass it on to the Galpas Association is so that we don't appear to be biased as water for people. So now it will actually be an arrangement with the Galpas Association to schedule the Galpas and know who has requested for the transfer tank first and who will be using it and in which areas they'll be using it. Yes.
Thanks, Yvonne. Yvonne had prepared some handouts that I will put outside, and then people can just take on the way out. Thank you so much. Round of applause. Thanks. So, and this brings us to our last speaker this morning, Teddy Gowden. Welcome. So Teddy, water and sanitation services in rapidly growing dense settlements and rural areas. Teddy has been an integral part of EWS efforts to introduce and scale up innovation within its areas of jurisdiction. Teddy will talk this morning about public-private partnerships in Durban. Teddy.
Thank you, Joanna. Good afternoon, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My topic is based on the complexities around public-private partnerships within the circular economy in Durban. I would like to also, before I commence, just acknowledge colleagues and partners on the project itself. I somehow seen that Professor Chris Buckley's name has fallen off. Perhaps his beard has pulled him down. So, eThekwini municipality covers an area of roughly 2,297 square kilometers with a population of 3.7 million people. And as you can see, there's an almost equal split between people living in formal dwellings and those living in informal dwellings in the rural areas and dense informal settlements within the city. So, water and sanitation. In the new political dispensation, water and sanitation was recognized as a constitutional right. And as a water services authority, we were mandated to provide these services. In keeping with the pro-poor transformation agenda of providing services for the previously unserved, we had to look at clear, innovative solutions. The densities and the terrain of the municipality itself it made it difficult for a one-size-fit-all kind of approach. So the learning by doing approach is what guided our decisions and strategy, and it is one of where research follows implementation, and if something has 80% chance of working, we would implement with the possibility to fail fast and improve thereafter. So the circular economy approach, what is it? It's most certainly not the environmentally unfriendly make, use, and dispose. In the circular economy, the toilet waste are seen as resources with multiple value streams. Durban, if we look at Durban, Durban was one of the early adopters of technologies and practices that supported the circular economy. One of the most successful interventions being the Durban water recycling plant, a public-private partnership on a 20-year concession that treats wastewater and resells to industry. This partnership is still in place and generating profit. In 2010, we had the DWAT plant, and this is in partnership with Border, looking at water to recovering water and nutrients for agriculture. This project itself was quite a bit of time in the research phase. We're now moving into the implementation phase. In 2012, we have the Laderpa plant for processing of pit sludges, and here we generate fertilizer from the plant itself. Whilst we didn't get to market with the product itself, a lot of it was used in the community gardens. So the 2013 VUNA research project looked at nutrient recovery from urine, and this is the subject of a project that we're currently looking at in terms of the new technologies that are out there, and that is the urine diverting flush toilet, the opportunity to now look at installing these in urban areas, collecting the urine and processing it. The black soldier fly, the subject of my talk today, which started in 2017. In looking at the circular economy approaches, we had some setbacks as we went along, and it's the sort of the legislation being impeding legislation that's still stuck in this linear approach that stifled a lot of progress in this area, and the other being the very blurred market conditions. The context in Durban, we have built over 80,000 urine diversion toilets, and this is going way back since 2003. The toilet itself, it's alternating chambers, and the contents remain in the vault for roughly 2 years before it's emptied. And the initial responsibility to empty was that of the householder. But research has shown that in spite of the contents being in the vault for over a period of 2 years, there were pathogens still prevalent in the fecal sludge itself, posing a great risk to the householders in emptying. So there was a commitment from the municipality to provide a free emptying service. The increasing densities in the rural areas also challenged the emptying and burying on site. So we had to look at other options and consider the recycling component. So at FSM2, we were introduced to the black soldier fly concept, and that really got us excited, and we started a lot of discussions with the Biocycle and the mother company, AgriProtein, and we looked at how are the different business processes to take the project forward. We were fortunate, and roughly around the same time, the foundation put out a call for a city partnership urban sanitation services, and we jointly did a submission and were successful in starting off a pilot in Durban. So the stakeholders of the project itself is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, providing the CapEx, the CapEx for building the plant, the municipalities for the oversight and program management and providing some of the funding as well. Emptying contractor, so the emptying of the urine diversion toilets and transporting the waste to the plant itself. Biocycle, the private operator operating the plant on a for-profit basis, University of KwaZulu-Natal for testing and monitoring, and Canisa Projects for project and business management. So looking at the flow of the process itself, I'm not going to go into great detail, but suffice to say that the UD waste was brought in by the private contractor. At the weighbridge, the contents were brought in, and that determined how much we paid the operator in terms of the gate fee. The two streams of waste, two resource streams, was the larvae and the residue, with the outputs being oil and animal feed, and on the residue being the biochar. So the two partnership contracts, so the partnership and the contract itself along the value chain, in the emptying and the transport, this was a tender-based contract using local entrepreneurs, whilst on the treatment and taking products to market was through a service level agreement with the operator. The tender-based contract, the contract specifications spelled out the scope of work with a lot of emphasis on the health, safety, and environmental compliance, the mentoring of both the contractor and the subcontractors on the project itself, quality control, and GIS being a management tool to program work packages and record information as to when the vaults were emptied and the general status of the toilets itself. The service level agreement with the municipality and the operator defined the risk, responsibilities, and the business model structure with the aim of really getting the product to market to ultimately offset our operational costs as well. So the pictures that you see there is the initial processing technology itself. That's when we started up in the early days, and we're treating roughly 3 tons a day. The business model, as I mentioned, the CapEx is provided by the foundation, and the municipality then provided a variable gate fee for the processing of the waste. The gate fee itself was more cost recovery for the operator in terms of recovering operating cost. So the incentive was really to get the product to market and generate profit, and ultimately share in the profit of the municipality. The results is that to date we have emptied over 50,000 urine diversion toilets. The processing plant in the early trial stage, it started roughly around 2015, 2016, and it was really just testing, but it became operational with the new processes in 2017. So the iterative testing processing elements still ongoing, and we made changes to the plant itself in terms of the screenings and of the detritus, because a lot of the trash and grit hampered the process treatment. We didn't factor in the impact of the weather conditions on the grow-out sheds. In winter, the cold weather really slowed down the larvae growth. And equally, you had to look at what was the optimum feed preparation in terms of looking at the different mixed fecal sludge and food waste, or primary sludge and pit sludges. So we really didn't have a product to really take to market. And the further challenges were really the different timelines that the private sector and the municipality meant that we couldn't make decisions very quickly. We also held back by the procurement processes from the municipal side. The private sector turnaround time is much quicker. The operational challenges that I mentioned is the high trash content that it needs screening, and the environmental conditions being the weather, and the low nutrient value of the urine diversion contents itself, the fecal waste, and the market acceptance and validation of products. So the FSM development cycle talks to the approach that we take, and one of continuous improvement approach, and as mentioned that we have research following the implementation. So we get real-time data, and we are able to then make these changes earlier on. So they follow the fail-fast strategy. The lessons that we've learned, the regulatory framework, legislation plays a critical role in creating the right environment and condition to allow the circular economy to develop the circular economy amongst business and the private sector. Incentives and penalties and checks and performance, I think there's great opportunity to also ensure that at the social level that we have some sort of incentives for householders to start separating the waste itself, so reduce a lot of our operational costs. Blended funding, in the case of this project, where the foundation providing the funds for the initial capex and the operator meeting the operational cost, together with us having to pay a gate fee, ensured that there was a vested interest to start getting the project to generate profit. So whilst there's valid business case for the circular economy, it's important to note that the private sector can only sustain services in the public space if their invested efforts is geared towards cost recovery or profit. So and also it's important to engage with the markets early so we understand the market demands and needs. We must also look at how we remove bureaucratic barriers and create an open space for innovation in which research and the business can contribute. In adopting a stepwise approach, it must follow a trial and error strategy, and we must also be willing to take risks. And finally, we need to be patient and perseverant. The return on investments and functional partnerships is not created overnight. It needs long-term commitment and vision to make the circular economy successful. In conclusion, I'd just like to add that fecal sludge management designed for resource recovery is an area of rapid technological innovation. Municipalities and business have an opportunity to start seeing sanitation as a medium of valuable resources and fully embrace technologies and practice that support the circular economy, which also offers added economic benefits in creating jobs and even new business sectors in domestic markets. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
Good morning, everyone, and wonderful presentation, Mr. Gundan. We really enjoyed that. My specific question was, in one of your slides, you mentioned a desludging subsidy by the municipality. And I'm a bit lost on that. Maybe I'm missing something, but it seems that there would be major sustainability challenges if you have that type of arrangement, and which invites all kinds of questions. For example, potentially, killing the market. Maybe there would be some people who would be willing to pay, but who can't. Also, this is a gift. For how long is this gift? Who is in and who is out? And if you have the boundary of who's getting a free service, then folks in adjacent areas might want the same. And finally, what is your type of exit strategy when you do have to bring in fees? Are they going to be willing to pay after having had this free service? And in Haiti, we've had many challenges when you have free neighborhood desludging. It's very difficult afterward to get that. Maybe you could comment on those specific issues.
So, in looking at the emptying and the subsidy, yes, the city itself, or if we look at the existing, we have the different levels of service. We've got VIP toilets, we've got urine diversion toilets, and then you have your sewage sanitation. When one considers that sewage sanitation is highly subsidized, and the costs are astronomical. So when you look at providing services for the poor, and you provide a free service, and if you look at the whole aspect of the circular economy, and I think it provides a valid case to provide that emptying services. We also got to factor in this whole aspect is, what is the cost of not providing it? You're providing sanitation to address the public health issue. And if you leave this to operate in its own way without, the private sector has a role to play, but it's got to be managed. And that's how we bring in the contractor and ensure that there is compliance issues, so we keep that entire value chain operating in a safe manner. So the exit strategy, it is really the whole aspect of trying to generate profit out of this is to offset our costs, some of our costs. We know we're not going to offset all of the costs, but again, it comes back to this whole aspect of what is the cost of not providing it.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Atta Benson from the Society in Nigeria. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I want to link your presentation to earlier presentations, particularly when it has to do with the private sector, because I like private sector when they are well coordinated and regulated. From all the presentations, I want to see the final treatment of the product. Where does it go to at the end? What do you use the final product for? And who regulates this to ensure its safety and friendliness to the environment? Because that did not actually come out from your presentation, which is very important.
Yep.
Thank you.
So yes, that's a valid question. So the operator of the plant itself, you know, because as a municipality, we don't have the expertise to manage that component in terms of getting the product to market. So the private operators have that experience, and they're very professional in that. In getting their product to market, they'll have to ensure that it complies with all the safety components around it, because we're dealing with fecal sludge, and we all know that there's lots of aspects. You've got your endocrine disruptors and a whole range of things that you've got to factor in. So as part of their trials that they have been doing here, it includes that component as well to ensure that the product and the quality meet with the market needs. So, because here we're talking about the end products being animal feed, and then you're looking at oils that could be removed received through the process itself. So the private operator, through his engagement with the current market, and be able to sell the product and generate the profit. We don't have that expertise. That is why we engage with the private sector, who has that market relation. I'm not too sure if I left out anything else in your question. Did I answer your question adequately?
The end product of your treatment, who regulates it?
Okay.
How are we sure it is environmental friendly?
Yeah.
Even if you have to hand over to a private sector, who monitors it to track it to logical conclusion?
So if you look at the current processes that we have, there's legislation through a national regulator that has developed the sludge guidelines in terms of how we dispose of, and if it's going to be reused for any other purpose, we'll have to show and demonstrate that the product is safe. So there is legislation in place that's monitored to a national regulator.
Teddy, it's Dave Wilson. Yeah, just to answer maybe a little bit more on what you were asking there, there's various aspects that they're looking at. There's things where it's the protein that's coming out of that. The protein can be used for fertilizers, in which case it doesn't have to go through strict agricultural legislations like for animal feeds, etc., etc. So there's other avenues that they're looking at. It doesn't necessarily have to be legislated with the government.
Thank you. A round of applause to Teddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we have about 10 minutes, so I would